Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. I am your host, June Archer. You are now inside the winner circle, and my special guest today is a Renaissance woman who does a little bit of everything and is so dope when it comes to spoken word, music, and just working with children. Please welcome to the show, Queen Bathsheba. Queen, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, June, for the opportunity to be on the show and the beautiful introduction.
It is a pleasure. The moment we met, your spirit, your energy, just amazing. For those who haven't heard about Queen Bathsheba, where are you from? And let's just start right there. Where are you from?
Well, I'm originally from Newport News, Virginia. We say bad news, but I am currently in Atlanta. I've been here for about 6 months now. So prior to that, I was in the DMV area. So I'm representing Atlanta and Virginia.
Now, while in Virginia, uh, I have read and understood you were honing your skills as a spoken word artist. What was your inspiration and who motivated you to even get into wanting to put your words on paper and get in front of people and actually recite what it is that was so heartfelt?
Well, I had a very difficult upbringing and I had to find some kind of outlet to get out what was inside of me and to kind of escape the environment that I was in. And so in sixth grade was when I first started to write poetry. I was introduced to the late Dr. Maya Angelou, and my godmom, she was instrumental in that process because she would encourage me by getting me a book by Maya Angelou every time I got straight A's. And so that inspired me to write poetry. And then there was also a math teacher next door, Dr. Darren Reed. I'll call him Doctor. Darren Reed. I think he works for this major educational company now, but he would always recite poetry and I would be inspired by him. And so listening to him, I started to write my first poem. And I remember in sixth grade, they blew up my poem and gave me this huge poster. I still remember how it started. Money glides, drugs slide from one hand to another, from one man to a black brother. And that's how I started writing. That was sixth grade. And it was just an opportunity for me to escape the projects, downtown Newport News projects, and talk about a lot of the things that I couldn't necessarily discuss with other people, given that I had an interesting upbringing with my mom being a single mother with 9 children.
Hmm. Hmm. Now, those words as a sixth grader, very colorful. What did you experience at such a young age that even allowed you to be so, if I could say, colorful, in that you're describing what it is that you are experiencing as a young child? Like, what were you seeing at that time?
Well, I played basketball a lot. I played basketball a lot, and I usually played with a bunch of drug dealers. So that's why I can enter any kind of environment and not necessarily phased by it because I grew up in that, in a very rough area. And so I saw drug dealings, I saw prostitution, and in fact, one of my siblings and even I was approached to sell drugs. And so that experience um, encouraged me to write about it because I had to have some kind of you know strength to say no, no, that's not the direction I'm going to head in. I had in my mind already, okay, I have this relationship with God. I've always known about God since I was young, and then I had this desire to get out of the projects and do something with my life in terms of career. And I've always thought that there was something great God had in store for me. And so having that experience and seeing those things, I thought, in sixth grade, maybe this is an opportunity for me to talk about it and expose other people to it who may not necessarily know too much about what's happening in my external climate outside of school.
Now, take me into the home of a single mom with 9 children. What was the environment like? Was it an environment that allowed you to embrace music? Was it a strict household because there was so much going on outside? Was it fun? I mean, 9 siblings could be a lot. I grew up in a household with just the two of us, and so we kind of had our space. But you hear about larger families, and if you talk about the Jacksons, right, and what they went through and how they became this. What was it like growing up in a household with 9 of you with a single mom? And I'm certain it's hard enough just to put food on a plate and on a table for one child when you're a single parent. You grew up with 9 of you. Talk about it.
Well, it's funny that you say the Jacksons because that's my maiden name, Jackson. And I had an intermittent father. Like he was in and out, and he was a pastor. You guys got to get the book to find out all the other stuff concerning that. And so I struggled with my identity, and within the household, there was never a time where all 9 of us were in the house at one time. So I'm smack in the middle, number 5, number of grace. So I had the opportunity to live with the first 4 and with the last 4.
Mm.
So um, there was just like maybe a small period of time where I was a middle child, but for the majority of the time, I was the oldest. So I took care of my younger siblings. And when my older siblings were still in the house, I was kind of, in a sense, a middle child because babies were still coming. And so being in a household where it was split that way and I had to acclimate to the older siblings and then the younger siblings, it was very challenging because as I transitioned into being the one who was most responsible, I was frustrated with having to take on some of those responsibilities, watching my older siblings get to do what they wanted to do, while also having to take care of my 3 brothers, wash them, like give them baths, take them to get their hair cut. Sometimes miss school so that I would be home, so that they could get home from school and be able to get into the house because my mom was not comfortable with giving keys to anyone. And then just, protecting my siblings outside of the home when we would go outside. My mom was very uncomfortable with sending us out, and I can't remember anything prior to 10 years old. But I remember distinctively being able to go outside around that age, and man, it was on at that time. By the time I went outside, everybody was trying to fight, and so I was well known for fighting, believe it or not.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I fought a lot, and my siblings were always getting me into some kind of fight because they would instigate stuff, or somebody would start something with them, and they would say, "I'm going to get my sister." So I was a little, eccentric at the time, still a little bit eccentric, but I didn't play around. And a lot of the people, because of the relationships I built with a lot of the drug dealers in the community, I didn't have to be afraid walking, several blocks and going different places because I knew they were looking out for me. They would say things like, "Don't mess with her. That's ball player. She going to the WNBA. She go be in the Olympics. Something. She's doing something." So I didn't really have to worry about those things. But within my household, that is where I had a whole lot of turmoil because of the identity crisis and not being able to talk about who my father was because he was a married pastor. And so, and taking care of my siblings, even after my mom, and I'm kind of speeding ahead here, but later my mom ended up leaving the youngest siblings, and at the age of 24, I took in 3 of my brothers at that time. They're doing well. They 2 of them have bought houses and they've graduated from school, but this is when they were teenagers, and so I'm 24 raising teenagers. And so it was an emotional roller coaster. It's nothing but the grace of God that has gotten me to the place where I am now. But that's it in a nutshell.
Now you're very deep rooted in spirituality. You mentioned your dad being a pastor. Was it a strict household in terms of religion, or did you just get your spiritualism through going through what you went through in order to get to the next day and the day after that and the day after that?
Um, it was a very strict household, but it was cult like,
Hmm.
to say the least. And my mom, and so getting back to your original question with the music, my mom would early Sunday mornings or just every day, I would wake up to like Mahalia Jackson and James Cleveland and run downstairs just to like listen to gospel music. And my mom called everything that was not gospel rock and roll. Everything was rock and roll, like something that rock and roll in my house. And so, while I'm listening to the greats on this side, on the gospel side, I'm also listening to like on my own in my bedroom, MC Light, Salt and Pepper,
Mm.
Queen Latifah, Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, Tony Braxton, like that. All of that comes together, and then later I started listening to bands like Green Day, and this is like much later, Skillet. All of that fused together is what gave me inspiration and what kind of um, has an impact on the way that I deliver my own music. So
I
it
was go-
was.
I was going to ask you that. Like, what were your inspirations? Because truly, you embody a hip hop artist. Like you're very well rounded, but there's some hip hop in you, and I wanted to know who were those artists that inspired you to even get into that journey and continue to inspire you as you continue to make music. Like who were some you mentioned MC Light, like who else has been an inspiration?
Well, definitely MC Light. I was I was thinking about the time I was standing next to my mom. I think I don't know if I was like 13, 12 or 13 or 14, somewhere around that age. And I didn't know what the lyrics meant. Right. So I'm spitting MC Light right next to my mom, and I'm like, B boy, I've been looking for you since a quarter past. Hot peas and butter, baby. Come and get your supper. Before I make your supper, that's when you had enough of. Can I get hot when you hit the jackpot? And my mom punched me dead in my back, right?
She's
Like,
like, not in this house.
not in this house. But I was definitely inspired by MC Light, Salt and Pepper. I love listening to some Salt and Pepper. And there was actually a poem that I wrote as a result of listening to Queen Latifah. And so a lot of them just listen, or even TLC. I listened to a lot of female rappers, but then I listened to male rappers too, like Mystical. Um,
Mm.
I remember getting like those CDs. Well, I guess I shouldn't say too much about that, but y'all know how it goes in the hood. So it just, but just listening to that music and sometimes just closing my door and blasting it. I also played the violin. I was like first chair in the orchestra in middle school. And so listening to that classical style of music while also listening to hip hop and rock, that explains the blend that I have now. With having that hip hop rock blend. But those were some of the major uh, artists who influenced me in terms of how I write, my style. And I sing as well. So I love Whitney Houston, I believe, is the greatest singer of all time. Listening to Whitney and Tony Braxton, because of how deep my voice is, I think I could pull off some Tony. So just a little bit, but yeah, blending those together.
Now, one of the things I love about you after numerous discussions, you are a lover of education, you're a lover of children, you even develop programs around it. Talk about how you even fell into just wanting to just help children. Was it because of your childhood and growing up and making sure that young people had the opportunity to get great education and great programming? Like what was it that allowed you to say, you know what, I want to create these things that gonna allow our young people to one fall in love with reading? Your advocate reader. Like what was it that allowed? And talk about this program because it's very amazing. When we initially met, uh, you showed me some images and just amazing work that you're doing with these young people.
Well, I will say I have been running from this calling for a very long time. I did not want to be a teacher, so I don't want to sound like I'm a saint. Like I started off as a saint, and I just wanted to help the kids.
But how you don't want to help the kid when Whitney Houston is one of your favorite. And she says, "I
I believe
believe
the
the
children.
children."
We used to have to sing that every morning, by the way, in the program that I was in as a child. But I did. The only reason I did not want to be a teacher was because I felt teachers didn't make a lot of money. So it was just in me, embedded in me to teach. I would teach my siblings. I would write stories at an early age, line my siblings up outside and have them with pen and paper and teach them a lesson like I was teaching a class. But I told myself I'm going to school to become a doctor because doctors make money. And at one point, I had even said something like a forensic pathologist, that not knowing that would lead me to deal with dead people all the time. I just wanted to be really impressive with what I said I wanted to do. But it wasn't until I was finishing up my undergraduate career, my undergraduate studies at Virginia Tech. This is like around my junior year. And I was working at the Virginia Bioinformatics Institute. My degree is in biology because I was going to school to be a doctor. And I had this allergic reaction to some medication. And while I was in the hospital, I noticed, like what the nurses and doctors had to do, and somebody was spitting into something. And I was like, oh no, I cannot do this.
Wow.
And so this is late. This is late because I'm almost finished undergrad.
Right.
And so I'm trying to figure out what am I going to do with my degree. And as I was trying to figure it out, I'm enrolled, I'm applying to graduate school. I'm thinking I want to get a master's in public health, but that's not the route that I needed to take. So I needed to, get my master's in health systems management with a concentration in health policy. So I ended up going to George Mason, still confused about what in the world am I doing? But on that road, I started to pay attention to how I would study. Sometimes I would not go to like my classes. I would just stay home and I would write bars. I started off writing biology raps so that I could pair the glands with the hormones. I'm thinking biologically through osmosis, the pituitary gland lets down oxytocin, right? And so I started to do that and started paying attention to it. So when I got out of graduate school, and I thought I was going to go directly into the health policy arena, and that didn't happen. I spoke to someone about, a school where they were working, and I told myself, well, I'll understand what young people are doing and how their health is impacted by being in the school system, and never left, right? Like I never left. And so my principal saw how, my students were progressing and how their scores were increasing and said, look, you need to go and take this test. You need to be in the classroom all the time. And so that was the beginning. But I remember waking up at 2:00 in the morning, and this is like the start to my first book. I was so disgruntled and frustrated with what I was witnessing in the DC area. Kids didn't have books. Kids, I hadn't seen anything like it. They were working off of worksheets, and I woke up 2:00 in the morning, and I just started complaining on paper, and it became the start to a book. And at that point, I could not turn my back on what I was seeing in the classroom and what was going on with young people. And I knew that I struggled with my identity, and I saw students struggling with theirs, and just trying to figure out how can I escape my current reality to step into who I truly am. So I brought all of that together, the identity crisis that I had, my ability to write music, and turn education into something that's entertaining, to create Cage-Free Voices, which is an educational entertainment company. And we create curricula that's interdisciplinary, it's personalized, and it's interest-based, because kids want to know where they see themselves in the curriculum. And so that's why our slogan is see yourself even if the world is blind. So we have music, jingles that go along with a lot of science content, math, social studies, all of it, because, that's what it means to be interdisciplinary. All of it is fused together while also hitting on social and emotional learning and spirituality, because I believe the fact that we have removed the ability for young people and just people in the general to express who they are on a spiritual level from the classroom. That's why we're starting to see a lot of kids do things that we can't even believe, like the 6-year old in Newport News, who shot a teacher. We have to address all parts of young people and just people, because that's holistic development. You can't separate out from, like, who somebody is. Say, you know what, I'm going to disregard this part and I'm only going to focus on this, and then expect to be effective.
And there's a lot of talk around that, Queen Bathsheba, that the education system is broken for a lot of people. There are teachers who don't want to go back to work, don't want to work. Some of them exhausted from the pandemic and how that changed education. There's also the realization that we have to reimagine education. So when you talk about cage free and you talk about the things that you're doing, it is needed now more than ever, because we are talking about social and emotional learning. We're talking about opportunity to teach kids about financial literacy that they're not getting, reading comprehension. Do you feel like the education system, and I want to say specifically for young people of color, is failing them now more than ever?
Absolutely. Absolutely. On numerous levels. I'm actually still in a classroom, right, while I'm building out Cage Free Voices, but you see it on multiple levels, and not just here in the United States. We see this in countries all over the world. And we talk about COVID being a pandemic. Well, we have an educational pandemic. And
Mm.
it is, when some of us were out due to COVID, there were countries who were out for an entire year. Kids were doing absolutely nothing at all. So we are in dire straits when it comes to preparing our students for the future, because while they were out, they were also engaged in, social media, or not having their mental health needs addressed. And so now we're starting to see students who are, because they were already behind. There were significant deficits in literacy with young people prior to the pandemic. And that's what I want people to understand. This did not just start. We had a major achievement gap before COVID even hit the scene. And so when COVID hits the scene, students are going over old material from classrooms. If you go and look at grade report cards for schools or school districts, whole years are missing, right? Whole
Wow.
years are missing because they don't want to present that data because of how far behind the students are as a result of the years in which we were out for COVID. So now you're having to face the fact that students can't write. I've encountered students who don't even know which side of the paper to write on, right? Uh, yeah. Or what a
Wow.
signature is, because cursive has been removed from the classrooms.
Right.
But then you have the need for trauma informed approaches in the classroom, because a lot of students experienced trauma while they were out, domestic violence, things that they may have been able to escape if they hadn't been quarantined for so long. So all of that is compounded. And being in a classroom with seventh graders or eighth graders or ninth graders who are on second, third, fourth, and fifth grade reading levels is just, it's disheartening, right? And a lot of work has to go into helping differentiate instruction so that students can get what they need while also addressing their social and emotional needs. So when I say differentiation, you can no longer treat your classroom as if it is, one size fits all, or you have some kind of master key to unlock every student. No, your instruction, you have to become creative. You have to figure out a way to make it personalized, and at the same time, meet the needs of every one of your students based on where they are academically. So if you have a child who is on second grade level and you have a student who's on eighth grade, Well, baby, you have to figure out how you're going to make sure that each of those students can access the material that you're teaching while teaching the strategies and the skills at the same time. And I started doing that. And we're not even going to begin to talk about the blended learning model, where you
Right.
have to begin to blend technology and face to face instruction, because kids, their minds are moving so fast, and um, they are used to being able to get on a laptop, get on social media, have things move pretty quickly, and you have to entertain them. You
Right.
have to captivate them, because entertainment is captivating them. You know, just being able to go to a YouTube video and it not be that long, 1 minute, 2 minutes, and you're in class and you're talking for 30 minutes. I don't hear anything that you have to say, right? Like
Right.
after 15 minutes, I'm done. And I always wonder why I was designed this way, but now I know for such a time as this. But even when I was in college, what I was saying about not heading to some of my classes, I would, first 15 minutes after instruction, the instructor is still teaching, the professor is still talking. I'm writing rhymes, I'm writing poems, I'm drawing pictures, right? And so those are our students. And that's why they're getting further behind, but further ahead at the same time, because the future is comprised of jobs that don't even currently exist, right? And so
Right.
they're preparing for those jobs unbeknownst to them, but we want to make sure that they have the mental dexterity, the clarity about their direction, their morality is intact, and that they actually have the foundation, right? The foundation in terms of just the fundamentals, like in literacy, numeracy, being able to, make calculations and computations, being able to read a prescription, you know, functional literacy. And if our students are not functionally literate, there's a spoken word piece that I do that's just like about this, because I'm really frustrated with this educational pandemic, and it's a pandemic of epic proportions. Why? Because so many of us are focused on other things that we're missing what's happening with youth today. And even if we don't care about young people and we're selfish, okay, be selfish and think about yourself. Who's going to operate on you? Who's going to
Right.
build your next bridge? If all of our students are not prepared, then we are in a terrible situation. And I'm not saying that some of them aren't, because we have students in Cage Free Voices who are in Nigeria, and one student in particular has been identified as an upcoming world leader, right? She is doing her job, but we need more people. Like, I'm not the only person. I can't be the only person on the front lines. There are so many other people on the front lines too, but more people have to come alongside us to address these issues. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in a classroom, but and I don't want people to confuse education with schooling, right? I just think that the system has to it's failing us. It's failing our children, and a lot of things have to change. And we're not even going to get into the money piece, charters, and how some of those operations take place. But June, you know how it goes with some of the schools, or even, not even being conscious of the impact that we have when we make certain decisions at an administrative level when we're talking about young people, because we're fixated on other things, and that has an impact on the children, it has an impact on families, and it has an impact on teachers. And now that I'm, what I said, I'm still working in the classroom as a teacher. I listen, my heart goes out to all teachers right now. It's like all of them.
And they are having a hard time. And I think if we reimagine it to do all those things that you mentioned, the hope is there is an attempt to lessen that gap, right? The hope is an attempt to inspire them to want to take the steps to learn reading and writing, because for some of them, they want to be ball players. Like you had aspirations, right? They want to be in the music business, as we both had aspirations. Uh, But if you don't know how to read a contract, if you don't know how to count your money, and you skip the step of foundational steps that you're trying to get in your formative years, then you fall into that gap of what happened to the Tony Braxtons of the world, or what happened to the TLCs of the world, and the MC Hammers of the world, and the list goes on and on. And not to say that they didn't have the education, but when you know how you want your business run and you have a mindset of Oprah, where you listen, I sign the checks, I see the deposits, and I send out what money's and how it's flowing, the business and the mindset looks a little different. So we have to trigger an opportunity to lessen that gap, because it is hurting our young people, but it is affecting our teachers as well, Queen. But we need them to understand we're not trying to tell you how to do your job. We're just trying to tell you you have to look at it from a different lens and execute it differently, because these kids think differently than we thought in the 80s and 90s. It's a totally different ball game. And then you throw in the social media, and then you throw in the technology, and now you have a totally different landscape. You were inspired to write this book. How did you even come up on the title? Like, what inspired you to title the book?
The first one,
The first one.
Who Cares What You Think? So What You Think? Because I started off just like frustrated, and I was like, I don't care. I don't care what people have to say about what I'm getting ready to say regarding, everything that has happened in my life and this identity crisis. And I saw myself in my students. And so I was, wrestling with the title, and there's a spoken word piece on this, but I was talking to one of the now pastors at my former church. And I was asking him, I said, so what do you think about the title? I said, it's called Who Cares What You Think? So what you think? And he is like, that's so dope. Who cares what you think? So what you think? And I didn't intend for it to be the title, right? Like, I was asking him what he thought. And so I was like, yep. Mm-hmm.
That's it.
That's it. That's it.
It's crazy. It's crazy how titles come and how the inspiration comes in those moments that you're like, yeah, that's gonna be that's the title right there. That's exactly what it is.
And isn't it how we all operate, like with this notion of I don't care, but I really do, right? Like I really do. So there's this conflict within us, this internal conflict where we want to emerge as our best selves. Going back to that poem that talks about like our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate, but that we are, I'm summarizing, but that we are powerful beyond measure. And so we want to exude this power that's within us, but we also feel the suppression and oppression from society. And so we engage with other people in terms of what their opinions are of us and try to, mold ourselves to fit what their expectations are at the same time. And so as you know, like that was the first book, but then I get to a place because that first book, it exhibits like, or exemplifies where I was at the time. And just, there's a lot of anger in the book. But the third book that I wrote is called What Happens to Them When You Change. And so it is transformational. You get to see the transformation of Queen Bathsheba and also notice like how I connect with different historical figures at the end of every chapter, because those historical figures like Susan B. Anthony, I'm using a positive one right now, or King Solomon, they all were human beings too, right? Who wrestled with wanting to be who they were created to be, while at the same time dealing with society. And so again, that goes back to see yourself even if the world is blind, even if other people don't see you, allow yourself to emerge from that cage. And Cage-Free Voices, like who would have known that I would have come up with Cage-Free Voices, 6th grade reading I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, like Dr. Maya Angelou. Is full circle.
That's so dope. I want to talk about this new record that you just dropped. It's 2023, new music, like right at the top of the year. You didn't play no games. Unchained. Tell us about the song, the inspiration behind it.
So Unchained is it is like my new anthem. Like embracing all of Bathsheba. That means like I'm not this cookie cutter religious figure. I don't consider myself to be religious at all. I just, I walk according to the two commandments that Jesus left us with, and that is to love your neighbor as yourself and to love your Lord your God. Y'all know the rest of it, but with all your heart, mind, and your soul. I'm paraphrasing, but I live according to those two principles, and so I don't want to be. You can be cage free, right? You can be
Right.
cage free, but you can still have chains, right? You can be outside of
Mm.
the cage and still keep on your chains because you think they look like jewelry. So I don't have time for it.
Wow.
I don't want to adorn myself with
Wow.
chains because I equate them with, this is how, I need to be as opposed to how God created me to be. And so Unchained is me making a declaration like, I know I misunderstood and it's okay. It's okay. Misunderstood. It's good. They should know who I am, but the fan be lost in the sauce with my thoughts. And I don't have time to explain. My game remains the same. Unchained, I faint not. Right? Like, I don't have time. If we spend our time trying to explain who we are, we miss time being who we are. So I don't have
Ooh.
time to explain.
Ooh. Hold on. Say that again, Queen Bathsheba.
If we spend our time trying to explain who we are, we miss being who we are. So it's
Mm.
okay to be misunderstood, but those who God has sent me to or that I connect with, those are my people. Right? Like, they may misunderstand some things. Like, the disciples, they didn't understand everything Jesus was talking about. They were like, I don't know what this man talking about. Right? Like, and I'm not saying I'm Jesus, I'm just using him as an example. But those who are drawn to you, those are your people, and they will be connected to who you are, not necessarily everything that you have to say or everything that you do, because they won't understand all of that. Right? But those people who are bent on understanding you because they have already made up their minds that they don't want to understand you, send them their way and grant them peace, grant them shalom, and just, keep moving in the direction in which God has you headed. Steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and so let's keep walking. And so Unchained is about, like, I'm an apostle. Like, I'm an apostle, preaching the gospel, but it's not the way in which that we, I you know I know there are some things that other people may disagree with concerning how I walk, how I walk this walk. But I know love conquers everything, right? Love covers a multitude of sins. And so if we love people, right, just genuinely love them by being who we are because we love ourselves, there is freedom in that. There's liberty in that. There is there are no more chains, right? Like,
Mm.
there are no more chains, and you encourage other people to be liberated as well. Like, not to just step outside of their cage, but to say, you know what, these chains kind of heavy. Like, I don't have time for this. Let me take this off. I'm free to love too.
That's beautiful. So eloquently put. I appreciate you sharing that. I hope that those who are watching or listening get that gem. You write that down because I think it's so profound. Like if you're wasting time explaining who you are, you can't be who you are, who you're meant to be, because you is that battle, is that internal battle of, well, let me tell you who I am. Let me tell you what I stand for, what I represent, and while you're doing that, life is passing you by, opportunity is passing you by, the universe is not allowing itself to wrap itself around you because you're stuck in that place of explanation, of validation. So I appreciate you sharing that. Sixth grader doing her thing out on the basketball court with drug dealers, in education, blocking your blessings because you don't want to be in education, but someone sees and 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 shows how great you are and instills greatness in you. You are this. amazing orator, what has been the soundtrack to your life? Because music is the soundtrack to our lives. What song best represents your journey up to this point? Is there one song that you could say, man, you mentioned Whitney Houston, but is there a song, whether it's Whitney or anyone else, that you're like, this is the song that really describes my journey up to this point? Because you have so much life left to live and so much more to accomplish and do. But what is that song for you, Queen Bathsheba?
Well, wow. I've always had like different soundtracks, and now that I'm asked the question, I'm like, which one of these songs is for right now? And I would say I have two, right? Like I have One Moment in Time by Whitney Houston, and then I have Lose Yourself by Eminem, right?
Mm,
Yeah. So lose yourself in the moment. You better never let it go. You only get one shot, right? So I feel like I'm in this space where I have a shot at, bringing what I know, bringing Queen Bathsheba to the world, and being all of who I am, and just walking in that grace and that truth, to encourage other people to do the same. And so, lose yourself in a moment. I've been listening to that song like every day now. And one moment at a time, like, God, just give me a moment, give me a break, give me an opportunity to be released into the earth, and to be launched, so that other people can know about, not just young people, but adults. And somebody just, this woman who, she has done a phenomenal job. She's been inducted into like the English International Honor Society. But when she started, like, I had the opportunity to teach her, but her talking about just where she is now. What Cage Free Voices is not just for young people, it's for people, right? It's your voice being liberated, and knowing what liberation is, and knowing that being cage free is not just doing whatever you want, but because some of the things we want to do are things that are a result of bondage that we previously experienced. So being cage free is operating in your God-given design. And so, like, those two songs right now for me, One Moment in Time and Lose Yourself, that's exactly where I am, because while I am losing myself, I am gaining me too. Right?
mm,
I am gaining me. I am, people say, remember who you are, like on Lion King, like, remember who you are, Simba, right? Like, remember who you are. But sometimes I think that we need to forget who we were so that we can become, right? Because some of the things that we remember about ourselves are not a reflection of who we truly are. Like, we
right.
remember experiences that have impacted, or impacted our development. Like, you grow up in around a bunch of people who do, terrible things, and you think that's who I am. No, that was your environment influencing you. That your environment was influencing you. Now let's get past the dirt. Let's get past the grime and figure out, who are you at your core? Without, not saying that we can't. Trials and tribulations help us get to a certain place, and they birth certain things out of us, and it gives us the opportunity to present fruit to other people, whether it's good or it's rotten, you know. But if we take some time to just unpack, we'll get to see, like, who am I need to forget the things of the past that told
Hmm.
me, this was who I am. But that's not really who I am. I need to take some time to discover me. Like, what do I like to eat? Do I like scrambled eggs? I heard somebody talking about that, like, what kind of eggs do I even like? Something as simple as that, right? Getting to the core of you, like, lose that old version of you and become a
Mm,
new creation. Like, become a new creation. And as you're becoming a new creation, the core foundational portions of who you are will always be there. Like, they won't ever disappear. So I think I'm losing myself and remembering me at the same time. And I just need that one moment in time to present Queen Bathsheba to everyone else, so that they too can see that they have the opportunity to lose and gain themselves by walking according to who they are.
All while being unchained.
Yep, all while being unchained.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Queen Bathsheba. She doing so much amazing things. Where can we follow you? How can we get the books? And what's next for you?
You can follow me on social media on Instagram at Sheba Neo Rock. That's ShebaNeorock. Facebook, just Bathsheba Smithin, and or you can type in Queen Bathsheba, and you can get the books on either Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, or you can go directly to our site at cfbonlinelearning.com. CFVonlinelearning.com. The CFV stands for Cage Free Voices. And go to the actual product page, and you'll find the books and be able to purchase them there. What's next for me is just to continue in this vein of building out and communicating with schools about our Cage Free Voices radio curriculum, so that students have the opportunity to learn digital broadcasting. And we're building our literacy, our lesson library, so that parents and students and school districts can access lessons that are interdisciplinary, personalized, and interest-based, while we continue with our one-on-one sessions in tutoring. And I'm big on trying to get this music out there. So that's what's next for me, is just continuing with the music, scheduling some gigs and performing, blending the music and the spoken word together. So I'm excited about that.
Queen Bathsheba, I know how busy you are, and I really appreciate this moment in time that we've had to talk about your journey, to talk about your stories, and the things that you're contributing to arts and entertainment. Ladies and gentlemen, please support this amazing young woman doing some great things. That is Queen Bathsheba. I am your host, June Archer. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is the Winner Circle, and as I always like to end, never leave the opportunity open to tell somebody that you love them. It may be the last opportunity that you have to do so. Queen Bathsheba, I love you, sister. Keep doing what you're doing. I love you, and I'm praying for you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. God bless you. Peace.
Love it too.